Hello everyone, my name is Christos Stavridis and I'm a procedural 3D artist from Greece. Today I'm going to briefly talk about HEXAGONA, my entry side FX Labs Tech Art Challenge where I got first place in the game art asset category. I'm going to do a small breakdown of the project, talk about my inspirations and also the challenges I faced during the process of creating it. So, what is HEXAGONA? HEXAGONA is a fully procedural hexagon-tiled board generator. It was created in Houdini and can be used in any application or game engine that supports Houdini engine to build your own board. It features a set of hexagon tiles to choose as your building blocks, a wide range of parameters for landscape and scene customization, different color palettes to apply, set dressing placement, and user input settings for further customization. The main inspiration for HEXAGONA was Simon Tartar's procedural board game map generator, a similar project to HEXAGONA with a basic difference. This is a generator made in Substance Designer and the output is a set of textures, while HEXAGONA produces geometry with different attributes and groups for the user to utilize. The moment I saw Simon's work, I was hooked, from the simplistic beauty of the hexagonal shapes to the vibrant color palette he used. For me, it was one of these projects I wish I had done myself. Although I later realized I wanted to follow a different approach centered around interactivity and functionality. At the same time, I discovered Oskar Ståhlberg's work and specifically his browser minigames Planet and Brickblock, a precursor of his current Townscaper. That is what I wanted to achieve with my board generator, the functionality for someone to create a usable mini-world. So, let's dive in Houdini for a small breakdown of the asset. There are 6 settings categories. General settings for the board itself, for shaping the landscape, including the sea, the color palettes and various modifications, scattering settings for the foliage and the rocks, settings regarding UVs and geometry, and finally some settings for custom user input. Starting with the general settings, we can set the size of the board. Choose our base style shape from 4 different pre-made shapes, the standard hexagon one, the chiseled one, my personal favorite with the rounded corners, and last one with weathered edges. There is also settings for the resolution of the board, and that practically means we have 3 different tile sizes, a small, medium and a large one. Finally, there is an option for flattening the board, but maintaining its color variations and depth. The mechanism that generates almost everything in the asset lies in the landscape settings and is almost entirely driven by noises. We have options to change the scale of the landscape, which is basically the frequency of the main noise. The height scale, which is the amplitude of the noise, remaps the colors based on the height position of every tile. A horizontal and vertical offset for the noise. An option to flatten the sea into a merged geometry while maintaining its color depth. And 2 more options for the sea level and its height offset from the shore. Very useful for creating an environment populated by islands or maybe peninsulas. In the color section, there is a library with different palettes, 4 of which are season themed, a desert and a volcanic one. These colors apply to both the land and the sea. I also included a more advanced way of remapping the palette's color range. Think it like a levels adjustment with 2 sliders for the black and white levels and their wrap position respectively. This is helpful if someone wants to remap the colors for a land with the mountains being more snowy or the sea being more deep or shallow. In the set dressing folder, we have the scattering settings for foliage and rocks. There are 3 foliage variations that depend and change with the color palette. There are options for the range of the mesh scale with a minimum and a maximum value. I height range for the placement of the foliage and the rocks, which also depends on the height position of each tile, and finally some settings that have to do with the way foliage and rocks scatter. There's an option for a more uniform scatter that depends on the density parameter, and one for a scatter that's being driven by a noise. I included some settings that have to do with the quality of the geometry and the unwrapping of UVs. There's an option for bevel geometry, which is quite heavy for a game engine but can be used for offline rendering, an option to generate UVs in case there's a need to apply a texture either on top of each tile or on the surface of the board. There's also separation of groups to assign different materials for the land tiles or the sea. These options must be used with caution and may be at the final stage of the composition, as they can slow down the performance. Finally, I included some custom settings for the user. For example, there are options to use a height map or color map image. With the use of a height map, the color palette gets remapped based on the height position of its tile. You can also assign custom colors for the board and the base of the tile, the sea, and the set dressing elements. There is also an option to use a custom mesh for the foliage or the rocks that are being scattered. As I said earlier, you can use Hexagona either inside of Houdini or in any application that supports Houdini engine. That was also one of my goals for the asset, to be accessible and as user-friendly as possible on any platform. That was also a great challenge to achieve and came with a lot of drawbacks. After a lot of playtesting in different applications, I realized that some of the UI elements, like ramps for example, aren't supported in some of the applications. So I had to restrict the parameters of the UI solely to sliders. And for some parameters, like the color's tonal range and values, it wasn't very user-friendly or clear. For the same reason, I sacrificed the use of splines and boxes to generate content, and instead I went to a full procedural generation through the use of noises. I also liked the idea of having this to work in an offline render workflow and thought it could be nice to have the option of a high poly version. There is a more lightweight version to run in the game engine and a high poly for a more cinematic approach. What I enjoyed the most while creating Hexagona was receiving feedback. I found that to be the most important aspect in the creative process, as I discovered different viewpoints and gained a better understanding of how to manage each challenge that arises. I am very thankful for the feedback and support I got from friends, artists and developers, especially from the KiwiNotes Discord server. Without them, I wouldn't probably be here talking to you. I am also very excited as I watched Hexagona being recreated and becoming a trend widespread as hexagon worlds. It's very fulfilling to inspire other artists, as other artists inspire me, and personally, it's the greatest reward to receive. I am very thankful for this invitation to talk about my work, and I hope that you find it informative. So if you have feedback to share, any questions, or you just want to say hi, you can reach out to me on any of the social media you like. Bye for now!